A village square packed with hundreds of people. The drums are beating for the New Yam festival. Everyone's celebrating, dancing, eating, laughing. And then, silence. A woman steps into the center of the circle. Her name is Chisom. She's been in this village for only 3 months, but everyone knows her face. She's the new wife of Dike, one of the most powerful men in Obioma. Dike is standing there, confident. Smiling. He has no idea what's about to happen. Chisom looks directly at him, and in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, she says, "This man murdered his first wife." The drums stop. The dancing stops. Every single person freezes. Dike's smile vanishes. His face goes pale. And in that moment, the entire village realizes something terrifying. This quiet, obedient woman they thought they knew? She's been planning his downfall since the day they met. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to when fear ruled Obioma. Back to when a woman named Nnena died, and no one said a word. This is the story of justice, courage, and the power of breaking silence. Let's begin. In the village of Obioma, nestled between thick forests and red clay roads, there lived a man named Dike. Dike was what you'd call a big man. He had money. He had land. His compound was one of the largest in the village, with multiple buildings, a barn full of yams, and goats that grazed on the greenest grass. When Dike walked through the village square, people greeted him with respect. When he spoke at village meetings, the elders listened. He was successful, influential, and by all appearances, blessed by the gods. But behind the walls of his compound, there was a different story. Dike's first wife was named Nnena. She was a beautiful woman, tall, with skin like polished mahogany and eyes that once sparkled with joy. She'd married Dike when she was 19, full of hope and dreams of a happy life. Those dreams died quickly. Dike had a temper. Not the kind that flares up and fades. No, his anger was cold, calculated, and brutal. If Nnena cooked his food too late, he'd throw the pot across the room and force her to clean it up with her bare hands. If she spoke too loudly when his friends visited, he'd wait until they left and then. Well, the village women knew. They'd seen the bruises Nnena tried to hide under long sleeves. They'd heard the screams coming from Dike's compound late at night. They'd watched Nnena flinch whenever her husband raised his voice. But no one said anything. Why? Because Dike was powerful. He had connections to the village elders. He loaned money to struggling families. He donated to the shrine. And in Obioma, power meant protection, even from justice. So the women whispered in secret. They offered Nnena sympathetic looks at the market. But they never intervened. Until one morning, when everything changed. It was a Thursday. The kind of humid morning where the air feels thick enough to touch. Nnena's younger sister, Nnena, came to visit the compound. She knocked on the gate. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. Finally, she pushed the gate open and walked inside. What she found made her scream. Nnena was lying at the bottom of the compound stone steps, her body twisted at an unnatural angle, her eyes staring blankly at the sky. Dike was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down. When he saw Nnena, he didn't panic. He didn't rush to explain. He just said calmly, "She fell. It was an accident." The village gathered quickly. People came from their homes, their farms, their shops. They surrounded Dike's compound, murmuring, staring at Nnena's body. Dike told his story with perfect composure. Nnena had been carrying a basket of yams. She'd tripped on her wrapper. She'd tumbled down the stairs. Tragic. Unfortunate. But an accident. Some of the villagers nodded sympathetically. Others looked skeptical. But no one challenged him. Except Nnena. "My sister didn't fall," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "She was pushed. I know it. Everyone here knows it. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few women looked away. One of the elders, an old man named Namdi, stepped forward. "Do you have proof, Nnena? Witnesses?" "I have the bruises I've seen on her body for years," Nnena shot back. "I have the screams this village has ignored." "I have grief," Dike interrupted softly. He placed a hand on his chest, his face a mask of sorrow. "I understand your pain, Nnena. I loved Nnena. Losing her is unbearable." He actually managed to squeeze out a tear. And just like that, the village chose to believe him. Nnena was buried 3 days later. Her family wept. The village women brought food and offered condolences. And Dike stood at the graveside, dry-eyed and dignified, accepting sympathy like a wronged man. After the funeral, Nnena tried to push for an investigation. She went to the elders. She spoke to the village head. She even traveled to a neighboring village to consult with a respected mediator. But everywhere she went, she hit the same wall: no proof, no witnesses willing to speak, and a man with too much power to challenge. Eventually, Nnena gave up. She left Obioma, taking her grief and rage with her. And the village? They moved on. Dike returned to his daily routine. He went to the farm. He attended meetings. He laughed with his friends at the Palm Wine Bar. But there was one problem: his reputation had taken a hit. The village might not have accused him openly, but they whispered. They avoided his compound. When he walked through the market, conversations would stop. Dike hated it. So 3 months after Nnena's death, he made a decision. He needed a new wife. Someone young, from a different village, who didn't know his history. Someone who would restore his image as a respectable family man. He needed someone he could control. And that's when he traveled to Umuabala. Umuabala was a small village, about 2 days' journey from Obioma. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where marriages were arranged by families, and where young women were raised to be obedient wives. Perfect, Dike thought. He arrived at the village during market day, dressed in his finest wrapper and carrying gifts: palm wine, dried fish, expensive fabric. He made himself known to the local elders, spreading his wealth and charm. Within a week, he'd been introduced to several eligible young women. But one caught his attention immediately. Her name was Chisom. Chisom was 23, with soft features and a gentle demeanor. She worked as a trader, selling vegetables and palm oil at the market. She was polite, soft-spoken, and, most importantly to Dike, she seemed perfectly docile. When Dike approached her family with a marriage proposal, they were thrilled. Dike was clearly wealthy, respected, and established. What more could they want for their daughter? Chisom's father asked her, "What do you think? Will you marry this man?" And Chisom, with a gentle smile, said, "Yes, father. I will." The wedding happened quickly. Dike didn't want to give anyone time to dig into his past. Within 2 weeks, Chisom was packed and ready to leave her village. On the morning of her departure, Chisom's mother pulled her aside. She placed both hands on her daughter's shoulders and said, "Marriage is not easy, my daughter. But remember, a good wife is patient, obedient, and wise. Make your husband happy, and you'll have a good life." Chisom nodded obediently. "Yes, Mama." What her mother didn't know, what no one in Umuabala knew, was that Chisom had been lying from the very beginning. You see, 3 months before Dike arrived in Umuabala, a traveling merchant had passed through the village. His name was Obi, and he'd just come from Obioma. Obi was a talker. He loved gossip, stories, drama. And one evening, while selling his wares in Umuabala's market, he told a story that made Chisom's blood run cold. "There was this woman in Obioma," Obi said, shaking his head sadly. "Beautiful woman. Her name was Nnena. Married to a wealthy man named Dike. And one day, she mysteriously falls down the stairs and dies." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "But everyone knows it wasn't an accident. That man was a monster. Beat her regularly. The whole village knew. But no one did anything because he's rich and connected. Chisom listened, her heart pounding. What happened to him? She asked. Obi shrugged. Nothing. He got away with it. He's probably looking for a new wife right now, actually. And just like that, something inside Chisom shifted. You see, Chisom had her own history with men like Dike. Her older sister had been married to an abusive man. For years, Chisom watched her sister suffer in silence, too afraid to leave, too ashamed to ask for help. When her sister finally died, officially from malaria, but Chisom always suspected it was from a beating gone too far, Chisom made herself a promise. She would never let another woman suffer like her sister did. Not if she could help it. So when Dike arrived in Umuabla weeks later, and when she heard his name, Chisom didn't run. She didn't warn anyone. She smiled. She played the role of the perfect, eager bride. And she accepted his proposal. Because Chisom wasn't looking for a husband. She was looking for justice. On the journey to Obioma, Dike talked about his plans. His farm. His compound. How Chisom would be expected to cook, clean, and bear him children. Chisom listened quietly, nodding in all the right places. And inside her mind, she was already planning. When they arrived in Obioma, the villagers gathered to meet the new wife. They looked at Chisom with pity, another young woman walking into Dike's trap. One elderly woman actually pulled Chisom aside and whispered, "Be careful, daughter. This man, he's not what he seems." Chisom smiled gently. "Thank you, Mama. I'll be fine." But what she really thought was, I know exactly what he is. And I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too. For the first 2 weeks, Chisom played her role perfectly. She woke up before dawn to start the fire. She cooked Dike's favorite meals, pounded yam with egusi soup, jollof rice with goat meat, pepper soup so spicy it made him sweat. She swept the compound until there wasn't a speck of dust. She washed his clothes by hand and hung them to dry in the sun. Dike was pleased. This was exactly what he wanted, a submissive, hard-working wife who knew her place. But Chisom was watching. Learning. Studying. She noticed that Dike's temper was triggered by specific things, being contradicted in public, feeling disrespected, losing control. She noticed that he was obsessed with his reputation. He needed people to see him as powerful, generous, untouchable. She also noticed the fear in the village. The way women's voices dropped when Dike walked by. The way men laughed too hard at his jokes. The way everyone tiptoed around him. And Chisom realized, Dike's power wasn't real. It was an illusion built on fear and silence. So she decided to shatter that illusion. Slowly. Carefully. One crack at a time. The first crack came 3 weeks into the marriage. Dike had invited 3 important men from neighboring villages to his compound. It was a business meeting. They were discussing a joint farming venture. Dike wanted to impress them, to show off his wealth and his obedient young wife. The men sat in the parlor, drinking palm wine and talking. After about an hour, Dike shouted toward the kitchen. "Chisom! Bring more palm wine for my guests. And bring cola nuts." In the kitchen, Chisom heard him. She'd been expecting this. She waited a moment, then walked out slowly, empty-handed. The men looked up, confused. Dike frowned. "Chisom," I said. "I heard you," Chisom interrupted calmly. "The palm wine is in the storage hut. The cola nuts are in the clay pot by the door. You know where everything is." She paused, then smiled politely at the guests. "If you'll excuse me, I have soup on the fire." And she walked back into the kitchen. The room went silent. Dike's face turned red. His guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of them coughed awkwardly. Dike tried to laugh it off. "Ah, new wives. Still learning, you know." He got up, retrieved the wine himself, and served his guests. But inside, he was seething. After the guests left, Dike stormed into the kitchen. "What was that?" he demanded. Chisom continued stirring her soup. "What was what?" "You embarrassed me in front of important people." "I was cooking." "You wanted me to abandon the soup and let it burn?" "You serve me when I ask." "That's your job." Chisom finally looked up at him. Her expression was calm, almost serene. "I'm your wife, Dike. Not your servant." Dike grabbed her arm, his grip tight. "Don't you ever disrespect me like that again." Chisom didn't flinch. She looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. And she said quietly, "If you hit me, Dike, everyone will know by morning. Every woman in this village. Every elder. Everyone. And they'll remember Nnena." Dike froze. For the first time in his life, he felt something unfamiliar, fear. He released her arm and stepped back. You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Chisom went back to stirring her soup. "Now, do you want dinner or not?" Dike left the kitchen without another word. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept replaying Chisom's words. The calm in her voice. The look in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of him. And that terrified him. But the real war had only just begun. Over the next few weeks, Chisom started making her moves. Every evening, after Dike went to bed, she would slip out of the compound. She visited the widows of the village, women whose husbands had died, leaving them vulnerable and often poor. She brought them food. She helped them with chores. She listened to their stories. And she asked questions. "Did you know Nnena?" she'd ask casually. Most women would tense up at the name. Some would change the subject. But eventually, a few started to talk. One widow, an old woman named Mama Ego, was the first to speak openly. "I knew Nnena well," Mama Ego said quietly one evening. "Sweet girl. Used to bring me vegetables from her farm. But that man, that monster she married." She shook her head. "I heard her screaming one night. It was so loud, I could hear it from my hut. I wanted to go help, but my daughter stopped me. She said, 'Mama, you can't fight Dike. He'll destroy our family.'" Mama Ego's eyes filled with tears. "I should have gone anyway. Maybe she'd still be alive." Chisom took the old woman's hand. "It's not your fault, Mama. It's his. And it's the village's for staying silent. What can we do?" Mama Ego asked helplessly. "He's too powerful." Chisom smiled. "Not if we stand together." Word spread quietly among the women. Chisom started hosting evening gatherings. Officially, they were prayer circles. But really, they were strategy sessions. Slowly, women began to share their stories. Not just about Dike, but about other men in the village. About abuse, fear, and silence. And Chisom? She documented everything. She asked detailed questions. She remembered names, dates, incidents. She was building a case. But she knew she had to be careful. If Dike found out too soon, he'd shut everything down. He'd isolate her. Maybe even hurt her. So she kept playing the obedient wife during the day. She cooked his meals, cleaned his house, smiled when he spoke to her. But at night, she was building an army. 2 months into the marriage, Dike started to notice something was off. The village felt different. Women were looking at him strangely. Conversations would stop when he walked by. And then one evening, he came home early and saw something that made his blood boil. His compound, was full of women. At least a dozen of them, sitting in a circle, talking quietly. And in the center, leading the discussion, was Chisom. Dike exploded. "What is this?" he roared. The women scattered like frightened birds, rushing toward the gate. But Chisom didn't move. She stayed seated, calm as ever. "We're having a prayer meeting," she said simply. "A prayer meeting?" Dike's voice was shaking with rage. "In my compound? Without my permission? I didn't realize I needed permission to pray. Don't play games with me, Chisom. What are you really doing?" Chisom stood up slowly. She looked Dike in the eye and said, "I'm building a community. Something this village desperately needs. You're making me look weak. You're embarrassing me." "No, Dike," Chisom said quietly. "You're doing that yourself." Dike lunged forward, grabbing her by the shoulders. His face was inches from hers, his breath hot and angry. "I could end you," he hissed. "I could make you disappear, just like..." He stopped himself. But it was too late. Chisom smiled. "Just like Nnena?" Dike released her and stepped back, his face pale. "I know what you did," Chisom said softly. "And soon, everyone else will too." Dike panicked. For the first time in his life, he wasn't in control. This woman, this quiet, obedient woman he thought he could dominate, was unraveling everything he'd built. He tried to go to the village elders for help. He stormed into Elder Nambi's compound one afternoon, furious and desperate. "My wife is disrespecting me," Dike complained. "She's gathering women in my compound, spreading rumors, making me look like a fool." Elder Namdi, a wise man in his 70s, looked at Dike thoughtfully. "What kind of rumors?" "Lies. She's trying to bring up Nnena's death again." The elder's expression darkened. "Ah. Nnena." "It was an accident," Dike insisted. "I've told everyone." "Yes, you have," Elder Namdi interrupted. "You've told everyone. Many times. And yet, people still wonder." Dike's mouth went dry. You believe me, don't you?" Elder Namdi stood up, his joints creaking. "What I believe doesn't matter, Dike. What matters is the truth. And if your new wife is asking questions, perhaps it's because those questions were never properly answered." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying," the elder said carefully, "that the New Yam festival is in 2 weeks. It's a time for the village to come together. To air grievances. To seek justice. If Chisom wants to speak, she'll have her chance. And so will you." Dike left the elder's compound feeling sick to his stomach. He knew what was coming. A public confrontation. A trial, essentially. And he had no idea how to stop it. He tried one more desperate move, intimidation. One night, after Chisom returned from one of her evening visits, Dike blocked the doorway. "This ends now," he said coldly. "No more meetings. No more questions. You'll stay in this compound, do your duties, and keep your mouth shut. Do you understand?" Chisom looked at him with something close to pity. "Oh, Dike. You still don't get it, do you?" "Get what?" "It's already too late. The women have spoken. The witnesses are ready. The evidence is gathered. You can lock me in this compound, but the truth is already out there." "No one will believe you," Dike said, but his voice lacked conviction. "They already do," Chisom replied. "And in 2 weeks, at the festival, the whole village will hear everything." Dike's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Chisom thought he might actually hit her. But then she said something that stopped him cold. "Nnena's sister is coming to the festival. Nnena. I invited her myself. She has things to say." Dike's face went white. The 2 weeks before the festival were torture for Dike. He couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. He considered running, leaving Obioma and starting over somewhere else. But his pride wouldn't let him. He'd lived in this village his entire life. He'd built his reputation, his wealth, his power here. He wasn't going to let some woman take it all away. So he decided to show up at the festival and deny everything. He'd call Chisom a liar. He'd discredit the witnesses. He'd charm the elders like he always did. He'd win. Like he always did. The day of the New Yam festival arrived. The village square was packed. Hundreds of people from Obioma and neighboring villages filled the space. There was music, dancing, food, palm wine flowing freely. And in the center, under a large tree, the village elders sat in judgment. Dike arrived early, dressed in his finest clothes. He greeted people warmly, laughed loudly, played the role of the wronged husband with perfect precision. Chisom arrived later, dressed simply in a blue wrapper and white blouse. She wasn't alone. Behind her walked a group of women, at least 20 of them. And among them was Nnena, Nnena's younger sister. The moment Nnena stepped into the square, the entire atmosphere changed. People remembered. People knew. Elder Nnamdi stood up and raised his hand for silence. The drums stopped. The dancing ceased. We are gathered here today, the elder began, not just to celebrate the harvest, but to address a matter that has troubled this village. Chisom, wife of Dike, has requested to speak. We will hear her. And then we will hear Dike's response. Let the truth be revealed. Chisom stepped forward. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady. My name is Chisom, she began. I've been in this village for 3 months. But before I came here, I heard a story. A story about a woman named Nnena who died under mysterious circumstances. A woman whose husband claimed she fell down the stairs. The crowd murmured. Dike stood up, his face red. This is nonsense, he shouted. She's trying to destroy my reputation with lies. Then let me finish, Chisom said calmly. And if I'm lying, you'll have your chance to prove it. Elder Nnamdi nodded. Let her speak, Dike. Chisom pulled out a small cloth bundle from her wrapper. Inside were letters, pieces of fabric, a bracelet. This bracelet belonged to Nnena, Chisom said, holding it up. Her sister, Nnena, gave it to me. Before Nnena died, she wrote letters to her family. Letters describing years of abuse. Beatings. Threats. Fear. She unfolded one of the letters and read aloud. Mama, I don't know how much longer I can survive this. Last night, Dike beat me so badly I couldn't walk for 2 days. He says if I tell anyone, he'll kill me. I believe him. Mama, I'm so scared. The crowd gasped. Some women began to cry. Dike jumped up. Those are fake. She made those up. Did I also make up the witnesses? Chisom asked. And one by one, women stepped forward. Mama Ego spoke first. I heard Nnena screaming the night before she died. I wanted to help, but I was too afraid. Another woman, I treated Nnena's injuries many times. Broken ribs. Black eyes. She told me she fell, but I knew the truth. Another, I saw Dike drag Nnena across the compound by her hair. She was begging him to stop. Even Dike's own cousin, a young man named Chidi, stepped forward reluctantly. I was visiting the compound the morning Nnena died, Chidi said quietly. I heard them arguing at the top of the stairs. I heard Dike shout, you want to leave me? I'll kill you first. And then I heard her scream. And then silence. The crowd erupted. People were shouting, crying, pointing at Dike. Dike looked around wildly. No. That's not, he's lying. They're all lying. Why would we lie? Mama Ego challenged. What do we gain? Money. Dike shouted desperately. She's paying you. I'm not paying anyone, Chisom said quietly. I'm just giving them permission to tell the truth. Elder Nnamdi stood up, his face grave. Dike, son of Okafor. These are serious accusations. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Dike's mouth opened and closed. For the first time in his life, he had no words. No charm. No lies convincing enough. And then Nnena stepped forward. "You killed my sister," she said, tears streaming down her face. "And you thought you'd get away with it. But justice may be slow, but it always comes." The elders conferred quietly among themselves. The crowd waited in tense silence. Finally, Elder Nnena spoke. "Dike. We cannot prove murder beyond doubt. But we can prove cruelty, abuse, and a pattern of violence. This village failed Nnena by staying silent. We will not make that mistake again." He paused, then continued. "Your punishment is as follows. You will spend 1 full year, 12 moons, serving the widows and vulnerable women of this village. You will fetch their water, repair their homes, work their farms. You will do this without pay, without complaint. Chisom will oversee your labor. If you refuse, you will be exiled from Obioma forever." The crowd erupted in approval. Dike looked around desperately, hoping someone, anyone, would defend him. No one did. His power, built on fear and silence, crumbled in a single afternoon. The first month of Dike's punishment was humiliating. Every morning, he had to report to Chisom, who gave him his assignments. Fetch water for Mama Igbo. Repair the roof of the widow Nkechi. Clear the farm of old woman Adiz. The entire village watched. Some people mocked him. Others felt satisfied seeing justice served. A few even felt pity. But Dike felt only rage and shame. He'd gone from being one of the most powerful men in the village to being its servant. People who once feared him now ordered him around. Children pointed and laughed. But slowly, very slowly, something began to shift. It started when he was fetching water for Mama Igbo. She was the same woman who'd heard Nnena screaming all those years ago. As Dike carried the heavy clay pot to her hut, Mama Igbo watched him silently. When he finished, she said, "My husband used to beat me too, you know." Dike looked up, surprised. "It was many years ago," Mama Igbo continued. "Before he died. I stayed because I had nowhere to go. No one to help me. I understand what Nnena felt. That trapped, hopeless feeling." She paused. "Do you?" Dike didn't answer. He just walked away. But her words stayed with him. Over the following weeks, as he worked for different women, he began to hear their stories. Stories of abuse, neglect, poverty, fear. Stories he'd never paid attention to before. One woman's husband had abandoned her with 5 children. Another had been widowed young and left with nothing. Another had been beaten for years before her husband finally left. And Dike started to realize something uncomfortable. He wasn't unique. He was part of a pattern. A system that gave men power and left women vulnerable. And he'd used that power to destroy someone. By the 3rd month, something in Dike broke. He was repairing a roof when he suddenly stopped, sat down, and began to cry. Deep, heaving sobs that came from somewhere he didn't know existed. The widow whose roof he was fixing, a young woman named Ifeoma, came outside. "Are you all right?" she asked awkwardly. "No," Dike admitted. "I'm not. I don't know how to fix what I've done." Ifeoma sat down beside him. "Maybe you can't fix it. Maybe all you can do is be better. Do better." "How?" "By actually changing. Not just serving your time and going back to who you were. But actually becoming a different person." Dike looked at her. "Do you think that's possible?" "I don't know," Ifeoma said honestly. "But I think it's worth trying." By the time the year ended, Dike was a different man. Quieter. Humbler. He'd learned the names of every widow in the village. He knew their struggles, their children, their dreams. He'd also learned something about himself. His anger had come from his own father, who'd beaten him as a child. He'd learned that power meant dominance. That love meant control. And he'd never questioned it, until Chisom forced him to. When his punishment officially ended, the village elders gathered again. Elder Nnena asked, Dike. Have you learned anything this year? Dike stood up. I've learned that I was a monster. That I destroyed someone I should have protected. And that no amount of service can bring Nnena back. He turned to Nnena, who was in the crowd. I can't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know, I'm sorry. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving I've changed. Nnena didn't respond. She simply nodded once and walked away. Some debts can never be fully repaid. Chisom never intended to stay in Obioma permanently. Once justice was served, she'd planned to leave. But the women of the village begged her to remain. And she agreed, not as Dike's wife, but as an independent woman with her own compound. She became an advocate for women in Obioma and surrounding villages. She helped women leave abusive marriages. She taught them how to document abuse, how to seek help, how to build support networks. Her work spread across the region. And villages that had once been silent began to find their voices. As for Dike, he eventually remarried a woman named Ojeki, who knew his entire history and demanded respect from day one. Some say he truly changed. Others remain skeptical. But what no one doubts is this: Chisom didn't just seek justice for one woman. She transformed an entire village's understanding of power, courage, and accountability. The story of Chisom and Dike became a tale passed down through generations. A reminder that silence protects the guilty. But courage, spoken, shared, and witnessed, can shatter even the strongest chains of fear. And sometimes, the quietest voice in the room is the one that changes everything. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button and subscribe for more African folktales. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway. I want to know what hit you the hardest. Share this with someone who needs it. Your voice matters. New story every week. Don't miss it.